Dave.
Hi.
We're here in the Hilton Hotel with your new multi-synchronic oscillator ensemble.
So, the Trident.
Talk us through, what is the Trident?
So, I'll tell you the story that maybe a year and a half ago, several people at various trade shows over the course of a few months came up and said, Dave, when are you going to design an analog oscillator? You always made the best oscillators. And my answer was, I'm waiting until I have some kind of an inspiration to do something new. I just don't want to build another analog oscillator, just the one like the ones I used to build for the EMU modular. And that inspiration hit. I was thinking about ring modulation and the fact that usually when you have ring modulators, you get these kind of science fiction noises that sound like tuning an AM radio, an old radio or something like that. And I realized that if you made those oscillators synchronous, you could force those odd harmonics to be in a very nice harmonic series relationship with the fundamental oscillator, and it ought to sound good. So I prototyped it up digitally. It sounded great, and that was the inspiration for Trident. But Trident is entirely analog, rather than implement it digitally, which I could have done but seemed kind of boring. I wanted to do another big analog project, and it has been a big project. I think there was a post of the prototype circuit board, and you can tell that there's a lot of complex circuitry in there to get everything that I wanted it to do and be as precise as Rossum modules should be. So let me first start here with Trident. We've got a couple of our beta testers have just put together some demos, so let me first turn this one on. This is using an assimilator to drive the Trident. So we get a nice drum track out of the, and the master oscillator here is being driven by the Trident, so you can hear some of the nice modulation in there. In a complex pack like this, it's hard to tell exactly what the Trident is, so we'll get into that in more detail a little bit. Take that guy out. And then here's a completely different demo over here. This is rather more obviously showing you some of the really interesting tones that can come out of the Trident, and also some of what it does if you don't put it into synchronization. So let's turn up the drum track on this guy. Now here we're just going to be listening to one of the outputs of the Trident right here. We'll take another oscillator output here and run it through the 2-pole low pass, which adds a little color to the sound. But even without that modulation oscillator, which is this knob here, as we turn up what I call the zing modulation, you hear that.
So we're listening to two oscillators with different pitch inputs, and then one of the oscillators is just as modulation.
Right. So that just gives you a quick idea of the sort of sounds you can get out. But I think probably at this point in time, people are asking, well, what is it? What can it do? And being a techno nerd myself, I probably should just walk you through sort of the details of Trident. So let's come up here. I have an oscilloscope on the screen up here, so we can actually see what the waveforms are, and it's quite a bit of fun as we get into the zing modulation to see how the waveforms behave as you modulate it. So as we say, it's an oscillator ensemble. There are 3 oscillators, one master or carrier oscillator, and then 2 modulation oscillators, 1 and 2. They're slightly different. The oscillators, they're good Rossum oscillators. They're rock stable. They're very exponential. Wonderful things if you're doing pitched music, and doesn't hurt you if you're not. The first one has 3 simultaneous outputs. We can see the triangle, sawtooth, and pulse waveform here. And if I go ahead and pop my oscilloscope onto those, we can see good clean waveforms. And the waveforms remain very clean all the way up to really, really high frequencies, up to 20 kHz. The waveform is still nice and solid there. Now, in Trident, this master oscillator is the one that gets modulated. So these 3 outputs are the ones that are really going to be interesting in terms of their sound and their wave shape. So we'll listen to those. Just classic triangle waveform, and I could go to the others and they would sound as you would expect them to be. If we come down instead and look at the modulation oscillators, again, if we aren't doing anything to them, let me turn off the synchronization on them for the time being. Once again, we see here we have a nice triangle wave oscillator, and here I can select the waveform. Now, one of the special things about the modulation oscillators is they have variable symmetry. So if we come over here and change, let's go back up to the triangle wave, we can see we can change the triangle wave, and let's listen to that. So there we're modulating, voltage controlled, from a sawtooth in one direction, other and in between. We can similarly, the sawtooth has a variable symmetry with a symmetry point in the middle. So you're getting, timbral modulations that are very similar to pulse width modulation. We also do that as well on these oscillators. The second modulation oscillator is just like the one we saw, except for it has an additional variable called the phase, which only has to do with the zing modulations. And we'll see what that does in just a second. So let's come back up here and go back to a triangle wave here and a triangle wave on this modulation oscillator. So without any modulation, we just get a nice triangle sound. But now if I turn up this knob called the zing modulator here, we begin to see now that this waveform is becoming pretty interesting here. And if I sync them up, let's listen to this. Get a nice timbral modulation there.
It's almost kind of a bit like the opposite to what a low pass filter is.
Right, exactly. I mean, but what the whole idea that I wanted to get with the Trident is to be able to give you a huge palette of different harmonic textures you can then throw into your filter and then sculpt with the filter as well. So the idea here is, you're right, it's the reverse of a filter. We're adding timbre here. But then we also, because of the synchronization, if I play with the frequency of that modulation oscillator, sounds like a resonant filter too. Now if I play with the symmetry, and that was just modulating with a triangle wave. If instead I switch the modulation waveform over here to the sawtooth, completely different waveform. Still go back to the triangle if I turn off the modulation. And now as I start playing around with my symmetry control, now one of the things about it, when we have these wave shapes, unless I want them to, if I keep the oscillators tracking, that wave shape stays constant. We've got a constant wave shape oscillator, but whatever I do, it'll modulate those timbres right along with the note. Now, as I promised, that second oscillator down here also has this additional phase control. So let's bring him in as the modulator here. Play with this symmetry control a little bit. Now if I play with the phase, what that's doing, that's actually changing the phase of the synchronization. Let's change the pitch down a little bit here. Sort of sound that what we're getting right there is it sounds that I love getting out of this thing, because they have this really interesting live variation to them but every knob you turn on it, it sounds somewhat different. So you can get a lot of subtlety. And then we can, of course, turn both modulations on at once. All these weird things going on with the waveform. They just, there's as much fun watching the waveform as there is listening to them sometimes. Another thing that I can do on the scope, maybe if we want to, we can do it a little bit later, is put it so that it's in an XY mode, and you get these really funny patterns, but they all correlate with the sound.
And at the moment, we've been listening to them both the modulation oscillators synced, right?
Right.
So we can obviously unsync those.
Yeah. Now, if you unsync them, you now drop out of this mode where it's totally waveform constant up here. So let's pull that out. And so now you can hear but we can fine tune them in. You want to put in a little FM in here, you've got things like that happening. We can unsync the other one as well. Again, really just very meaty waveforms. Now the oscillators, if you want it, I didn't put a low frequency mode button on them, but they will go down way into the LFO range. And if you turn off the sync and turn off the tracking, you've got 3 independent oscillators. So if you don't feel like using the modulation features of it, you've got 3 VCOs to do whatever you want with after that.
Excellent. So, do you have a kind of shipping kind of date, or are you kind of aiming for where you're aiming for?
We're looking to ship in spring. My best guess is we're going to ship probably during the month of April. These prototypes, there's a couple more changes to the circuit board, but everything's working completely to spec right now. So it's just a matter of turning that production crank and getting it going. So I'm quite confident they'll be coming out quite a bit. They're already available for order from the dealers, and it seems to be fairly popular. I've been pretty pleased from the response over these past couple of days. It's actually been pretty exciting.
Excellent. And what sort of price point are we aiming
at? We've announced the price at $599. Okay. That's US dollars.
Excellent. Well, Dave, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Should we have a look at the?
Yeah, let's go over to that XY mode. Hold on, just a second here.
So for people who are doing kind of vector graphics and stuff like that, this is going to be a great oscillator.
Oh yeah, this would be really a lot of fun for that kind of stuff. Let's turn up the other zing mode here. So you can see how much fun this is. The sounds are great, the pictures are great, and I really had a good time designing it as well. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but that's what I love to do. So
And it was nice getting back to kind of analog after doing the
yeah.
digital filter and
Yeah. The assimilator was,
well.
was such a big digital project that that was one of the things that the rest of my company indulged me and said, yeah, go ahead and do it analog, Dave. So there we are.
Excellent. Well, Dave, thank you very much.
You're welcome.